And of course, that would be a diagnostic wax-up would be performed. You'd have a mock-up made in the mouth of the patient, and then you would reduce based on the mock-up contours. So here we are, just kind of doing an aggressive sort of facial veneer preparation at this point, and working our way to the point where we're about ready to move on to interproximal clearance. And the purpose of interproximal clearance is just that: break contact, get clearance. So I'm going to switch now to the 878K012. Could you stay with the same burr, the KS0? Absolutely. But it's a wider burr, and some people feel a little uncomfortable trying to pass that wide burr through the contact area. So I'm demonstrating here with the 878K012, which is a much smaller burr and allows you to pass through and leave a little shell on the distal there, and we're going to do the same thing on the mesial. And we're not trying to create a beautiful finish line. We're not trying to have a beautiful final result at this point. The whole purpose of this is to break contact. We are not really concerned about anything other than break contact. And while you're breaking contact, keep aware of three things. Don't over taper, don't go too deep axially, and don't hit the adjacent tooth. So that's really what it's all about. And we've broken contact, so mission accomplished. If you wanted to keep going with the 878K and remove a little bit of that irregular interproximal tooth that's kind of sticking up there, by all means you could do that. That is definitely something that is worthwhile, because the next step will be to go back in with our favorite burr, the KS0, and make the shoulder uniform 360 degrees around this tooth. So let's go ahead and break contact on the mesial side in the same manner. Working the burr down from the top, not trying to push the whole burr through at once, but just sort of making these little brush strokes, working our way down, nowhere near hitting the adjacent tooth. And we have sort of this feather edge chamfer look, which is definitely not our final margin design. For our final margin design, we're going to need to use the KS0, and it is helpful to pull the burr out of the handpiece a little bit and move that burr all the way around the tooth. And we're going to go across the facial, and we're going to try to paint the margin down nicely so it follows the scallop. The burr is just, isn't it amazing? The burr is amazing. It just follows the rise and fall of the scallop of the tissue so well without creating little steps along the way. And I'm surprised that more people don't use this burr for their all ceramic preparations. It's fantastic. And here we are in the lingual, doing the exact same thing. The burr is slightly tipped towards the facial to create a little bit of taper, and we're going to follow the scallop around again. The wall, of course, is much shorter on the lingual, but we just think about following the scallop and going in axially to the full depth of the burr. And we know it's 1 millimeter. That's what we want. Easy to use. So just continue with the KS0 until the burr goes the full depth. You can run it interproximally now with a little caution. Make sure you're not getting too close to the adjacent tooth. If you are, that means you're not deep enough axially. That's one comfort about this, is that you know that you can't hit the adjacent tooth if you've got the proper shoulder depth. So let's just watch this last little bit here, and then we're going to go into the lingual fossa reduction. For this, we want to use a football-shaped burr, and there is a burr called the 379-014. It's a football-shaped diamond. It's coarse grit, and it's easy to use because you just go ahead and make a parabolic shape following the original fossa. But it's important to make a little depth cut in here. I know some people have asked me, how do I make sure I reduce enough off the lingual fossa, well, you do the same thing I've been doing on the facial. You make a little plane that is half of that parabolic shape, and then you can take a look at this from the side view, and you'll be able to see that it is in fact the adequate reduction that we're looking for. So you can see we're doing almost like a little silhouette technique, taking away half of the prep and then looking at the remaining two structure, and then we can just remove the other half. It's really quite simple. I will say that in the laboratory we see a lot of preparations that have not reduced enough in the lingual fossa, and it leaves us with very little options, as my technicians complain quite a bit that there's very little room to create nice lingual morphology, and things get kind of thin back here, and it could lead to maybe restoration fracture. All ceramic now is really strong. Zirconia is incredibly strong. It's got high fracture toughness and high flexural strength, but it can crack and break, and there is the risk of that happening if we are under reducing. For the rest of the video, which is another 12 minutes, we're going to show you how to refine, and really this is such a time-consuming thing to do, but it's so important. And we're going to switch over to the KS0F. Now this is a 30 micron grit diamond. It is exactly the same shape as the KS0. It's a slightly longer burr, which is great, and you're able to get access to the entire walls almost at the same time. And you can see that it just sort of runs along the shoulder that we've been working hard to create on that lingual side. Your taper shouldn't be really changing very much. You're kind of following what you already have. Always checking periodically from the occlusal or the incisal view to make sure that you don't have any undercuts. If you see a rough spot or an irregular area, go ahead and feel free to make a correction. This is the time to do it. Use a brush stroke. I think using a slow speed in the friction grip handpiece attachment or an electric handpiece is probably an alternative that a lot of people find very helpful. I am showing everything here with a high speed. I have some margin defects to correct, which we will do. We are going to create just a slight amount more taper so we don't have any risk of an undercut. And if you have any J-shaped margins, you're going to want to make sure that you use just the tip of the burr to knock them off, and it works really well. So keep that in mind. Also, keep referring to the adjacent tooth. That's what I just did there. I held the burr up against tooth number 9 to get an idea of what angle I should be holding the handpiece to make sure that we're going to have a uniform reduction on that facial. So here I am again, just double checking, triple checking, making sure that I am in fact following those clues, those hints for us as we're preparing our tooth. We are looking from the side like this a lot. I wish that more of us did this because it would lead to a much easier time for technicians and produce results I think for dentists to be more happy with. So here we are, just following that, and you can see that you can get it pretty close to paralleling. Oh, take a look at this. This angle here is this oblique angle is a great way to remove a defect. So if you have a little kind of a vertical defect, you turn the burr about 45 degrees and run up and down it, and you can remove it just instantly. It's a really cool technique. This technique was taught to me by Dr. Richard Tucker. He probably doesn't know that he taught me that, but he did. I heard it from him about 25 years ago, and it was very helpful. So once again, we're just finessing the finish line, removing any little scratches, double checking our draw, making sure that we're following the contours. Look how that follows the adjacent tooth contour pretty closely. That's a really important view for us to take a look at. Really critical that we have it mimic what the original tooth did. We want to round off all sharp line angles. Don't have any sharp edges anywhere, even between the lingual fossa and the axial walls around it. So everything right down there, everything gets rounded off. The corners, the edges at the incisal edge, these little transitions between the lingual fossa and the axial walls. You really can't overdo it. This is super important. And so we're using a really light touch on the high speed, or you could also use the slow speed for this as well. Well, the draw is a problem. You can see the distal lingual is completely under-reduced, which is why we're doing this. We want to go ahead and make this correction. So we're going to get the burr in this area and start to reduce, usually a little bit above the finish line, and then work your way down to the finish line, because sometimes the problem is above the finish line. And there are some sharp angles that we want to round off. Just keep assessing it, go back and forth, however many times it takes. And you should be your harshest critic, and anything that doesn't look right, you just go ahead and make that correction. A lot of what we do in dentistry is making little errors and having to correct them. You can see that distal is still not enough. We've got to continue with the burr and take away more of that axial wall and make sure that the shoulder is in fact 1 millimeter. It looks to be a little bit shy at this point, so we'll just keep running the burr down until we have what we need. So we make little errors, we correct them until the errors become so small that their correction is not a major issue for the final result. This is 7404, and this is the companion to the 379, and this is a little carbide burr, and it's just going to kind of smooth off the fossa. It's really shaped right for this. It's perfect all-around carbide for many things. I love this particular burr. I use it for a lot of preparations, particularly gold onlays and things, but it's being used here for creating this lingual fossa. And we just sort of smooth this off. It doesn't take much effort. It's pretty easy to do. I like the fact that you can maintain this rectangular sort of look to the incisal, and sometimes when we reduce, it's not there. But you can shape that by just running the 7404 across the lingual to create that little rectangular incisal edge to it. So look again, make sure there isn't anything at all that you want to correct before you go into the final polishing stage, which is coming up shortly. Double check all your clearances, make sure you've got your 1 millimeter shoulder, make sure that you've got 1.5 clearance going through the lingual. Take a look at the incisal edge. Is it 2 millimeters shorter than tooth number 9? If it's not, you can go ahead and correct that. You see how that 1 millimeter instrument would wiggle, but the 1.5 instrument is just tight. So that's just right on the money. This is the back end of a burr, and that's 1.6 millimeters. And so if you don't have an RGS instrument and you're desperate, you can use the back end of a burr that's 1.6 millimeters, and it gives you a pretty good idea how close you are to the right amount of clearance. A little trick that you might want to use. And there's your RGS-3 measuring a 1 millimeter shoulder, and that 1 millimeter shoulder should be verifiable all the way around. There should not be one spot where that instrument hangs off the edge of the finish line, and it should be all the way around. Okay, so right there at 1 millimeter. Okay, at this point I think it's kind of nice to go into some polishing. Don't overdo it. We just like to use maybe one polisher. This is a Jiffy Green cup, and the Jiffy Green cup is latch type, and so it's great for your, obviously your slow speed. And so we're going to go ahead and use the Jiffy Green cup on the lingual to smooth the lingual fossa, to smooth the incisal edge, to round off the incisal proximal corners, and to remove any defects we can get access to. Those of you that are watching this video with the idea of working on patients, you're thinking, well, that works great on the Typodont, but that can't work in the mouth. And you'd be surprised, this is exactly what I do in the mouth. I use the Jiffy in the mouth. It works beautifully on enamel and dentin, and it polishes the surfaces fantastic. I use it all the time. I use it for veneer preparations, all ceramic preps, continuously, and have been doing that for years, and I found it to be very effective. So we'll spend a few more minutes polishing and finishing, and let's do a little post-op assessment to make sure that we are in fact 2 millimeters reduction on the incisal. We're following the contours of the adjacent facial surface. We have a lingual fossa that has been reduced appropriately, smooth, continuous shoulder margins 360 degrees all the way around. We can use the RGS-3 to measure that 1 millimeter and just make sure 100% that we are exactly where we want to be, and we're pretty happy with that. It's just 2 millimeters, maybe slightly more than 2 millimeters of incisal reduction when we're finished. So I like to use the burr to create a little shelf, and since the burr is exactly 1 millimeter in diameter, it gives us a great reference point. We can use the burr for all the information we need, and we can leave a little section of tooth that has not been reduced and feel fairly confident that we have in fact reduced 1 millimeter. And at this point, if you wanted to, you could use the RGS-3 or anything that's 1 millimeter, the burr itself, to convince yourself that this is in fact a 1 millimeter reduction. And to reduce it 2 millimeters, it's really simple. You just do it again. So go ahead and take the burr once again in the same manner we just did, but go another step further down. Now I'm going to hold back just a little bit from the full 2 millimeters in this particular example because I want to have a little room for finishing and polishing, and I don't want to over reduce. So I'm going to go just shy of 2 millimeters. And I think that that's a really good idea because you can always go back and make this correction at the end. We do want to be mindful of the fact that this is an unfinished portion of the preparation, and you are going to need to go back. That was the RGS-1 and then 3 rather, and here's the RGS-4, which is 1.5 millimeters, showing you that we're just about 1.5, which is right where I want to be, so that we're conservative. We chop off the rest of that, slice it off very easily and make it straight. And I think that you'll see that the incisal reduction is pretty straightforward. Don't take the burr all the way over to tooth number 9. You could risk nicking the tooth, so it's okay to leave a little ski jump over there. So let's do our lingual clearance, and once again, same burr. We're going to use that KS0 for this as well. And for the clearance, because of the increased vertical overlap, we're going to need to have the burr angled quite steeply to gain clearance of 1.5 millimeters. And like the incisal, we could be a little shy of 1.5 to give ourselves a little room for finishing and polishing at the end. But we're going to hold the burr very steeply. You can see that was our reduction for incisal, but this is about where we're going to need to be for lingual clearance because of the coupling nature of the lower incisors with the lingual surface of that maxillary incisor. And start slow. This is a very critical step. It's a step that I think that gets overlooked a lot, and it's very important to separate incisal reduction from lingual clearance. And when we break it up this way, we find that our preparations don't have a lot of the errors that preparations can sometimes have when you're trying to do lingual clearance and incisal reduction simultaneously. So take it in a stepwise manner and go ahead and reduce this across. Just take your time, and we're going to go ahead, and you'll see that we go through this a few times. It's not that simple to get this clearance. You can easily overdo it, so I'd rather cut a little bit, measure, cut a little bit, and measure, and close the typodont, or have the patient close, and double check as you go to make sure you've got enough room for function. So let's close the typodont together and check what we've done with this initial pass, and nope, not enough. Even though we've removed tooth structure, we're not even close. Like, this is an RGS-3, which is 1 millimeter in diameter. It will not even come close to fitting through there, and it's got to pass all the way through. So we're at it again. Now, sometimes at this point, you may make the determination that you need to steepen the angle of your burr. It's not simply a matter of reducing more, it's a matter of changing the angle so you can make it a little bit steeper. But I like showing it from the side here like this so that you can see how more than 2 millimeters of incisal reduction when we're finished. So I like to use the burr to create a little shelf, and since the burr is exactly 1 millimeter in diameter, it gives us a great reference point. We can use the burr for all the information we need, and we can leave a little section of tooth that has not been reduced and feel fairly confident that we have in fact reduced 1 millimeter. And at this point, if you wanted to, you could use the RGS-3 or anything that's 1 millimeter, the burr itself, to convince yourself that this is in fact a 1 millimeter reduction. And to reduce it 2 millimeters, it's really simple. You just do it again. So go ahead and take the burr once again. It's almost parallel in the same manner we just did, isn't it? But and go another nature of further down. Now I'm going to hold on back just a little bit from the full 2 millimeters in this particular example because I want to have a little room for finishing and polishing. So now we have the RGS-3 fitting in some spots. So we've got about a millimeter there, but 2 millimeters. The lower incisor, and I think that's a really good idea because you can always go back and make this correction. And if this was in a patient, we do want to have either corrected that orthodontically or made some minor unfinished size changes to that. You are going to need to go polishing it with the RGS-1 before we start aesthetic dentistry. And here's the RGS-4, which is 1.5 millimeters, showing you that we're just about 1.5. Take a look at the, which is right where I want to be. So that we're conservative. Always chop off the rest of that, make sure slice it off very easily when it comes to and make it straight restoration. And I think that you'll see that here we are checking again. The incisal reduction 1 millimeter straightforward does pass. Don't take the burr all the way over to tooth number 9, and it's interesting nicking the tooth, so it's okay to leave a little tooth structure, a little ski jump over significantly, and yet. So let's do our lingual clearance, and once again, do this same burr. We're going to use that KS0 for this as well. And for the clearance, because of part of the video very much a vertical overlap, we're going to need to have the burr angled quite steeply to gain clearance of 1.5 millimeters. And here we are again. And like now the incisal, we could be a little shy of 1.5 to give ourselves a little room for finishing and polishing at the end. And I think that we're going to hold the burr very steeply. We can see that was our reduction for incisal, but this is about where we're going to need to be for lingual clearance because of the coupling nature. Now the axial reduction lower incisor is done with the lingual surface of the same burr, the KS0 incisor. The burr is so versatile. And starts to be used for just about every very critical step. It's a step that I think that gets overlooked a lot. I like it's very important to separate incisal reduction from lingual clearance. Tend to leave grooves. Break it up this way. You have to spend a significant amount of time removing. Don't have a lot of the errors that preparations across the incisal have when you're trying to do lingual clearance and incisal reduction simultaneously. And almost like we're making a little shoulder. Take it in a stepwise manner. And this is a really cool technique because as you go across like this, you can really measure exactly how much tooth structure you're taking away. you'll see
and
that
everything is
we
smooth
go
when
through
you're
this
finished
a
rather than
few
having,
times,
it's
ditches and
not
grooves.
that simple
You have this nice smooth
to get this clearance.
surface. So
You
we created this
easily
little ledge
overdo
down
it,
there, and you can
so I'd
verify
rather
that.
cut a
There's
little
an
bit,
RGS-3,
measure,
1 millimeter,
cut a little
looks
bit,
like
and
a little
measure,
shoulder.
and close the type it
So
on.
what's next? Well,
or have the
just
patient
go ahead and
close.
follow that
And double check
depth
as
plane
you go to make sure
down
you've got
into the
enough
middle
room for
third,
function.
and then down all the way
So
to
let's
the
close the
gingival
typecon
third.
together.
So it's just
and check what we've
incrementally
done with
working
this
your way
initial
down
pass, and
to get the entire
nope,
facial
not
surface,
enough. Even though we've
reduced.
removed tooth structure, we just
So here we
we're
go.
not even
And,
close.
you know,
Like, this is
sometimes
an
the
RGS-3,
burr is
which
a
is
little
a millimeter in
short on
diameter.
the handpiece.
It will not even
and you may
come
need
close to
to
fitting
push
through
the
there,
button and pull
it's
out
got to
another
pass all the way
millimeter and a half,
through.
2 millimeters, 3 millimeters
So
of burr. You can
we're at it
usually
again.
scooch it
Now,
out.
sometimes
maybe
at this
about
point,
3 millimeters
you may
before the-
make the
the
determination
chuck
that you need
of
to
the
steepen the
handpiece.
angle of your
Can't
burr.
pull the burr any further.
It's not simply a matter of reducing
So
more,
here's
it's a
our next
matter
plane in
of
the middle
changing
third.
the angle.
This is
so
a
you
very
can make it a
different
little bit
technique
steeper.
than
I
what
like
you
showing
have
it
been
from the
taught
side here like
probably
this
in
so that
dental
you can
school.
see
And
how
I've developed this over 30 years
more than 2
because of the
millimeters
problems that
of
we've
incisal
seen
reduction, when we're
teaching
finished.
students and working with dentists.
So I like
and
to
also what I see
use
in my
the
dental
burr
laboratory
to create a little shelf.
I've got a
and
dental
since the burr is
laboratory
exactly
in
1
Burbank,
millimeter
California,
in diameter. It
and
gives us a
we
great reference point.
see
We can
many,
use the burr
many
for all the
hundreds
information
and
we need.
hundreds of crown
And we
preppers
can leave a
every
little
month
section
from
of
dentists
tooth
all
that
over.
has not been
And
reduced.
the
And feel fairly
tendency
confident that we have in
is
fact
to
reduced 1
not
millimeter.
get the reduction
And
right
at this point,
all the time.
if you wanted to,
And
you could
we
use the
struggle as dentists
RGS-3
with this. This
or
is
anything that's 1
hard
millimeter,
thing
the
to-
burr itself,
to wrap our heads around
to convince
get it
yourself
right every
that
time.
this is
So
in fact a 1
these
millimeter
depth planes
of
do
reduction.
seem to help
And
a little bit.
to
now,
reduce
of course,
to 2 millimeters,
preparation
it's really
guides,
simple.
putty
You just do it
guides
again.
are awesome.
So go
to
ahead
use.
and take the burr once again.
I'm
the
making
same
this
manner we just
video
did,
so that those
but
that
go
cannot
another
use those,
step
like in
further
a test
down.
situation,
Now, I'm
perhaps
gonna
you're not
hold
allowed
back
to.
just a little
So
bit
you'll have a technique
from the
that
full
does
2
not require
millimeters
the use
in
of
this
a-
particular
of a
example
putty guide.
because I want to have a little
But
room
obviously
for
in
finishing
private
and
practice,
polishing.
working on a patient,
And
I
I
think
don't
that a putty
want
guide
to
would be,
over-reduce, so I'm going to go
a
just
fantastic
shy
way
of
to
2 millimeters.
validate.
And I think that that's
verify
a really good
your
idea.
reduction
because you
based
can always
on
go
your
back
final
and make this
required
correction at the end.
restoration.
We do want to be
It's almost
mindful
parallel
of
to
the
the
fact
level
that
process,
this
isn't it?
is an unfinished
that's
portion
the nature of the
of
Gilbert
the preparation,
preparation.
and you are going to need
On the
to
Columbia
go back. That was the
or
RGS
the,
1, and
for
in
Sacco, you'll
3
find
rather.
a different
Here's the RGS 4, which is
interval relationship,
1.5
different
millimeters,
angles.
showing you that we're just about 1.5.
So now we have the
which is right where I want to be
fitting
in some spots.
so that
we've got about a
conservative.
millimeter
We
there.
chop
but
off the rest of that,
that lower
you know,
incisor
and slice it
kind
off
of
very
angles
easily.
uphill, doesn't it?
And
So
make
it
it
makes
straight.
it a little bit tricky right
And
there.
I think that you'll see
and if
that
this was in a patient,
the
we
incisal
would
reduction
have
is
either
pretty
corrected that
straightforward.
orthodontically. Don't take the
or
burr all the
made
way
some
over
minor
to tooth number 9.
incisal
You could
changes
risk
to that
nicking
tooth,
the tooth.
by
So
polishing
it's okay
it,
to leave a
leveling
little
it off before we
little
start
ski
the
jump
jump
over
dentistry.
there.
Whether we're
So
doing
let's do our
veneers,
lingual
crowns,
clearance, and
even
once
glass
again,
work. Let's
same
we
burr.
sometimes
We're
wanna
going to
take a
use
look
that
at the
KS0 for
lower
this as
teeth.
well.
I wouldn't
And
say sometimes, I
for
say
the,
always.
the clearance,
Look at the lower
because
teeth
of the
and make sure that they're
increased
not going to be an issue when
vertical
it comes to
overlap,
your final
we're going to
restoration.
need to have
So
the
here we
burr
are checking
angled
again,
quite
and now
steeply
the 1 millimeter
to gain
instrument does pass
clearance
through
of
almost, but still
1.5
binding.
millimeters.
And it's
And like
it's
the
interesting
incisal, we
that
could be a little
you
shy of
remove tooth
1.5
structure
to give ourselves a little room for finishing and
significantly,
polishing
and
at
yet
the
you
end.
still don't have clearance.
But we're going
It
to
takes
hold the
some
burr
time to do this.
very steeply.
And I think
You can
it's
see that was
very,
our
very
reduction for
important
incisal,
step.
but this is about where we're
And
going to need
I
to be for